What's up, agents? Biz here, and we got another Division 2 build video for you. It's been a while since I found myself in the Dark Zone, but it seems a reunion is in order. Today, you're in for a treat. We'll be exploring two builds perfect for the current state of Division 2 PvP. The first being a really simple bleed build that I've been having fun with, and the other being a really strong counter that you need to beat this type of build. As always, thanks so much for stopping by. We've had a lot of fresh faces come through, so anyone, whether new or old to the channel, you're welcome here. You guys enjoying the channel has been a real motivator to keep it going, and I'm happy to do that. Since it's been some time since we've done PvP, let's chat in the comments about the Dark Zone. Which zone do you like the best, and why? While you guys chew on that, let's settle in, crack a tall boy of liquid death, and roll the tape. Ever since the launch of Division 2, I've waited for something to come around and have a similar feel to Predator's Mark from the first game. For those who haven't played Division 1, Predator's Mark was one of the gear sets added after the second incursion, Clear Skies. This gear set, and later on its classified variant, would apply bleed status equal to a percentage of damage done in the previous 10 shots. I had so much fun in the first game with that set. The amount of damage over time was not to be messed with. Back to Division 2 though, and we still have people fascinated with making bleed builds, myself included. One thing that is sort of a double-edged sword with this game, while we don't have anything as disgustingly overpowered as Predator's Mark, we have several ways to make a pretty solid substitute. Build diversity is much stronger in the sequel, that's for sure. But on to what you guys came here for. While setting up this video, I pulled a little inspiration from a double feature I did on the Ridgeway's chest back, I think, Halloween 2020. If you want to check it out and see even more build possibilities, I'm going to put a link above in this video. This build is set up on a demolitionist specialization. I went back and forth when testing this, but ended up here for the group buff to damage targets out of cover. Also, the automatic reload when armor breaks comes in clutch in those rough situations. Overall, this build is a 4 red, 2 blue core setup. We focus on crit chance and damage where we can, but we also have a status effect attribute to help strengthen the bleed. For weapons, we have 2 heavy hitters in the M1A CQB and the Tactical Mark 16. For this build, I like the harder hitting guns in an effort to chunk a lot of opposing players' damage. Full disclosure, you can really do any gun here. The important part of your weapons is that they have the weapon talent Sadist on them. Now, Sadist will grant 20% weapon damage to any bleeding enemies. Gear-wise, we see 4 pieces of the gear set ongoing directive. Using the 4 pieces will give us bonuses to status effects, reload speed, and grant the 4-piece Rules of Engagement gear set bonus. This will grant hollow point ammo to you when you eliminate a status affected enemy. This special ammo will deal 20% amplified damage and cause a bleed. Speaking of bleeding, we went with a backpack for one of our 4 pieces of OD. In doing so, we unlock the Trauma Specialist talent, where the bleed duration is increased by 50%, and the bleed damage is increased by 100%. When testing this in the gun range, we were bleeding enemies for about 1.8 million each time they got the bleed effect on them. Moving on from the gear sets, the chest we went with for this was the Ridgeway's Pride. I've talked about this chest in a few videos, including my Eagle Bearer build video, so I won't go at length discussing this, but basically, you bleed any enemy you hit and subsequently get armor regen for every enemy that's bleeding within 10 meters. Your enemy's blood loss is keeping you alive. I mean that's gross, but still helpful. Finally, rounding out the gear is my good old Fox's Prayer. These come even more in handy as the rifle damage is actually relevant to this build. Not that matters when you're getting amp damage targets out of cover and you're the best knee pads in the game, but here we are. Looking at the overview of this build, it may seem a little underwhelming. Keep in mind, this sheet doesn't include the status effect damage you'll be doing, nor the amp damage from the hollow point rounds. Once you get this build going, it's going to be really hard to stop. Unless you keep watching this video for the counter to this build that we just went over. Yep, we're not done yet. As I said, we got another build, and this should stand a fighting chance against that bleed and put out decent damage to boot. To start, Some thought went into what we're up against. I mean, this guy's getting armor regen and special ammo off of everything that bleeds. Off of everything that bleeds. I mean, definitely hazard protection. I know this one. It's hazard protection. Yeah, hazard protection. If we can make a setup with enough hazard protection, and specifically bleed resistance, that should take away a good chunk of that Blood God's power. So how do we do this? Well, again, reaching into my vault, I have a backfire build that's specialized in preventing bleed from the reload of backfire. So let's dive back into that and remaster it for a serious counter to this bleed build. To start, we begin again on the Demolitionist. More or less the same reasons apply as the previous build, especially the group buffs to target out of cover. On the weapon side of things, we lead off with what will be the only gun you should need to get the job done. We landed the custom M870. While I'm toying with the idea of doing a whole video on this gun alone, its base damage is more than enough to wreck anything in its path. We also throw In Sync on here. This will give us extra damage when we have a skill out, so that, on top of the 1.4 million base damage, yeah, that should be enough. For the secondary, we kept the backfire strapped, as its payment in kind talent will stack crit damage and barely tickle us with the bleed when we have to reload. It made sense to stay on in case the M870 didn't do the trick. Also, it's kind of a troll to the Blood God that you're keeping a gun on that's going to bleed you. At least I think. Moving to the gear, we have a 2 blue, 4 red setup, similar to the bleed build. Because we're not using gear sets, we get a lot more attributes, so we have 10 red and 2 blues set to bleed resistance. We start at the named Yal mask, the Hollow Man. The brand set comes with a bonus to hazard protection, but the named bonus in damage to health will come in handy should you need that edge to finish your opponent. Moving over to the backpack, we have the Matador with perfect adrenaline rush. This brand bonus will give us a buff to weapon damage, but that talent will help keep us vertical and dangerous with bonus armor. Rounding out the gear for the rest of the build, we have 2 pieces of Sokolov giving us bonuses to SMG damage and crit damage, and 2 pieces of Seska adding bonuses of hazard protection and crit chance. We also see when we look at the chest, we have Intimidate as the talent. This will combine with Adrenaline Rush perfectly, as we're going to get amplified damage whenever we have bonus armor. Very nice. Finally, in skills, we see a combo of a Striker Drone and a Crusader Shield. I like both of these as they're both easy ways to get in-sync churning so that the shotgun can do what God created it to do. Make a hole where there wasn't one. Looking at the stats, this build certainly looks better on paper than the first one. That's because we're not hiding any damage. The really impressive side of the setup is the hazard and bleed protection, where we see almost 70% of bleed damage being mitigated and almost 50% of hazards being mitigated. The bleed god will now be somewhat mortal. You did it! Overall, both of these builds are a handy tool for PvP or even PvE. Also, it just goes to show that everything has a counter. And if you're having a hard time figuring out a counter to a build you've seen in the Dark Zone, let's talk about it in the comments down below. Figure it out together. Either way, that will wrap things up for today. Thanks so much for sticking around. I know this was a little bit of a longer video. I hope you enjoyed watching it, though, as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, and you haven't already, please consider liking and hitting the subscribe button to support the channel for more Division 2 and Heartlands content coming soon. I'll catch you guys next time. Biz out.